Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. On the show today we have Qaanitah Hunter. I'm delighted to have her here. She's an award-winning political journalist, editor and best-selling author based in Johannesburg. She is also a founding editor of the Debrief Network, correspondent for Newsroom Africa, and also contributes to Al Jazeera English, and a columnist for News 24. And I kind of wonder, where do you get the time to do all of this and so much more in your life? Assalamu alaikum, welcome. I'm absolutely delighted to be chatting with you today.
Wa alaikum salam. Auntie Julie, I'm so honored to be here. You and I go back a long, long time. Absolutely. I was a teenager when we first met.
And I can't even begin to tell you how much of pleasure it gives me to be in conversation with you today, knowing where and how you started and look where you are today.
Alhamdulillah.
I also remember that story of how you came to Johannesburg, and I think it was with a pair
with the pink shoes.
And I think the only pair of shoes you had at the time, and the big dreams you had for yourself. Did you ever imagine, Qaanitah, that it would come to this?
I think that I had this reckless yaqeen that Allah will sort me out, and that I was on a path to something. I didn't know what it was, and I think that I still have that reckless conviction. I say reckless because it's a bit mad sometimes, but to believe 100% that I will be sorted out, and where I am is exactly where I need to be. And I think that helps you when things also don't go the way you exactly envision it to be. So it's sometimes, you know, people obviously see the outcomes, and many people don't see the journeys along the way. And I think that when you have that maddening belief that this is where you are headed to, and these are the goals that you want to achieve, you become less married to the road that's taken, and that if there's detours, then there, so be it.
You've written quite a number of books. You have obviously co-authored, and we're going to talk about it, Why Am I Like This? And I was absolutely delighted by your first book, Diary of a Guji Girl.
Yeah.
And I always kind of wondered why you chose that title, because I'm a Guji girl as well.
And I'm not.
And that's why I found it so fascinating.
Yeah.
And of course, you've written 3 very heavyweight political books. And the reason for why you've moved away from, and I suppose it's just a temporary pause, and then you go into something pretty light but meaningful as well. Did you ever think that this is where you're going to be at this point in your life? And I know you talk about believing in your convictions, following your heart. And if you believe enough in yourself, and like you mentioned just now, the yaqeen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, things will fall into place.
And it's the timing thing. So I'll talk to you about timing. Guji Girl was written when I was 19 years old. I had gotten an internship that was in Midrand in a newspaper. And I had to make my way to Midrand. And I didn't have a car, didn't have family in Joburg at the time. And so I would take public transport to work. But the thing about public transport is that taxi will not leave until it's full.
Right? Absolutely, yeah.
So because I wore hijab, they would call me Mzege Zege, right? And it was like a moniker that I got in among the taxi drivers. And I would sit in the front because they said, okay, no one will sit next to you, which came with the price, because then I had to collect the taxi fee. And I'm not really good at maths. But while sitting there in the mornings on my way to work, I would write this, the story. Now, what many people don't know about me is that I suffered from extreme dyslexia. The teachers that taught me when I was younger probably are very surprised that I became a writer. Physically, to write with a pen is a very difficult thing for me. You could never understand my writing. But I always loved politics, and I loved storytelling. And so what I would do, my mother would encourage me, she's now late, I would write these stories for her, and we'd have a shared email drive. So I would like email her, like myself these little snippets, and she would read it, and then she'd phone me at the end of the day, why did you kill this person? So telling stories was very embedded in who I was. And so then I started writing Diary of a Guji Girl. Literally in a taxi on a small little iPad, I would write these stories and I'd put it on a blog, a WordPress blog. It was riddled with mistakes. But somehow that blog got viral. And next thing you know, there would like be 2 million hits on this blog. Wow. And Shafinaz Hassan, who's been a great supporter, she's a well-known author, she said to me, this needs to be a book. And I said, no, I'm in the midst of forging a strong political career for myself. I'm not going to write fiction. This is nonsense. She says, no, I think it's very important. And I think we published 1,000 copies in the first print run, thinking, that's a lot. And we were sold out, I think, in 5 days. And it just took a life of its own. And then I said to myself, I was a little bit disdainful for the success of Guji Girl, which didn't make sense, because I was like, no, I want to be a serious political journalist. I don't want to be writing, romance and fluffy stories. But I loved the experience. I loved the community that it built. And what I didn't appreciate, because I think I was very young at the time, I didn't appreciate what it did for making people feel seen. Muslim, brown, South African experience. You wouldn't just read it every day. And I think that till today I hear that. And I said to myself, okay, I love writing fiction, but I will come back to it once all of my bucket list items as a political journalist is ticked off. And I was very resolute about it. And there was a huge, adoring fan base, if you like, or audience that wanted to, read more stories. And I said, no, I need to focus. And the one thing I say, I don't have many skills in life, but there's 2 skills that I do have. One is discipline, and the second one is audacity. Everything else is, I kind of get by the minimum. But it's audacity to say, I'm going to be this and I'm going to do this. And then it's the discipline to get it through, alhamdulillah. So then I spent, so Guji Girl came out when? 2014. So it's been 11 years. By that time, I was already a reporter. I've been a reporter now for 15 years. And then last year, I walked out of a very big job. I was essentially the deputy editor for News and Politics at News 24. I was tired, burnt out, completely, utterly tired. And I said to myself, okay, let's shut down. If you don't be on the front line of political reportage, investigations, scrutinizing politicians, leading a newsroom at 26 years old, and not face burnout. It's just not possible. And so I decided to kind of revisit all of the things that I've wanted to do in my life, but because I was so focused on work and all of the things that came with it, I never had the chance to. And fiction was one of it. So last year I said, what if I just go sit on an island, which I did, the island of Lamu, Kenya, where there's no cars, Auntie Julie, there's only donkeys. And I sat for a month, and I just allowed myself to grapple with things that I've been hiding for a very long time.
Why Lamu, Kenya, and what did that journey, that isolation, self-exiled isolation do for you, for your soul, and of course, probably questioning your purpose in life, though at this very still young age of your life, you've achieved so much more than perhaps your contemporaries. I mean, you walked out of a top-paying, high-profile position, and you decided to go into self-imposed exile. Is it about finding yourself? Is it about reflecting? Is it about who am I, where to from here? And that's pretty early in your life to be even doing that type of soul searching.
I think what it was the silence that was necessary, because I make this comparison. In the there was a 5-year period where my career was steadily increasing. I was getting byline after byline after byline, opportunity after opportunity. I was on planes with the president, and I was writing books, and we had conversations about the awards that I've had. But those 5 years were probably the hardest years of my life. Those years, I had lost my mother suddenly. I had lost my father suddenly. I had lost a child suddenly. I had gotten divorced. I, cherry on top, lost all my savings. These were like things that take decades for people to recover. It was concentrated in a 5-year period. And you know, it was such a contradiction, because when you're going through bad things, it's easy to just go through the grief. But when you're going through all of this loss laid by all of this blessing and opportunity, it almost becomes hard to toggle between being superbly grateful for what you've been granted and all of these amazing opportunities, and at the same time settling in that grief of loss of a parent.
I think one can never ever get over that or kind of equate it in any way and make sense of it in your everyday life. But with us as Muslims, we do accept that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the best of planners. And on that note, let's take a break and we'll come back and talk some more. Qaanitah Hunter has privileged me to be on the show today, so keep watching. Welcome back. My guest is Qaanitah Hunter. A little bit about her. She's authored 3 books on politics. She's also the co-author of Who Will Rule South Africa, and she's promised me that after this interview, sometime in the near future, she's going to come in and talk about the books on politics that she has written. She has also contributed very meaningfully to public debates on South Africa's political future. And of course, today we're talking about her book, Why Am I Like This? Would you like to respond to the question I put to you, or a comment I made just before the break, and then we can move into why am I like this?
I think that those experiences that I had gone through were formidable in that it kind of molded me to what I was, but there were two juxtapositions that existed. The first was I kept it moving. So massive, life-changing experience, and then it was, well, you just have to keep it moving. You have to keep doing the next thing. And I sat for a long time last year trying to figure out what was the kind of motivation of, or what was underpinning this need to just keep on. And I think there was 2 sides to it. The first side of it is denial and the avoidance part of grief, because once grief catches you, it really takes hold. But the second part of it, I think it was this discomfort with all of the other blessings that were happening in my life. And I felt like I owed it to all of this opportunity and blessing to just be grateful and keep it moving, especially for someone like me who had come from a very humble family, who come from very humble beginnings. It's not lost on me, the opportunities that I've had. So, but grief doesn't work like that. Grief doesn't say we'll meet on the 26th of November at 9 a.m. and then we'll process. It just simply doesn't work like that. So when the crash happened emotionally and the burnout reigned, it was not a thing of something was wrong in my life, or there was a particular incident. You know, if you could say, oh, this happened, therefore, you know, she sort of had this burnout episode. It was literally everything was right, but the batteries were flat.
Okay. I think a lot of us find or want to find a reason for why we reach a point of burnout, because it gives sense to what we're going through. Your situation sounded a bit different. However, you then, after all of that introspection, the grief, and whatever else was going on in your life, you found yourself in Kenya. That was a concerted effort, was it not?
It was.
Because you went to go and write the book, Why Am I Like This? Tell us what that experience was like. And do you ever find that you were in a position of writer's block because of everything you went through?
I think it started when I just decided to do that IT thing of plugging out the computer and restarting it. And so I just shut down my life as I knew it. I left my job, I packed up my house. That's what burnout did to me. Like, it needed a fresh restart. And I had amazing opportunities. I spent time in Tarim in Yemen and had an amazing opportunity understanding tasawwuf and understanding how people live and their relationship with deen and their relationship. Because you see, the thing about burnout is the biggest sign, or the most obvious sign, is the spiritual burnout that comes. And I think that most of us fix everything else and we don't start with that core nexus. And so I had opportunities. To some degrees, when I reflect about last year, I think I was like a mad person. I sat in masjids in Turkey, and I would just sit and I would read Quran and just sit a lot with myself. And I have an amazing network of people whose couches I slept on, and so that's how I was introduced to Lamu. And then when I went there for the first time, I said, no, I gotta go back. And so I went and I performed Umrah, and then returned back to this island and said, I want to sit here for a month. There's something about this place. Every person, not many people go there. It's difficult to get there. You have to, fly and take a boat, but it was something about the stillness. They have a phrase they call pole pole, which is just like, take it easy. And that Swahili culture of people being deeply religious and deeply calm and at one with themselves is something I never experienced in my life. There's no electricity for 6 hours a day. Therefore, you sit it out. I didn't get a local SIM card. So if I was not at the place that I would eat and write at, or in the place that I was staying, I had no connection to the outside world. The only people I knew were the people who lived on the island. There was a handful of them, and you make connections, and people, get used to you, and you other tourists. And so there's absolutely nothing to do. The days revolved around the adhan and salah and going to the beach. When the tide comes in, the fishermen go out, and that's just what it was. And I'm saying, for someone who's been jetting there, UN, AU, this, that, the other, this was extremely foreign to just sit still. There's no such thing as hot water. There's no geysers there. There's no such thing as windows, like glass windows. It's all open. And that level of simplicity, I documented a little bit of that time where just went to spend time watching a donkey sanctuary, for example, or there was an orphanage that I went to. Again, just allowing yourself to be immersed in a completely different world. Firstly, it's an absolute privilege. It's not lost on me. The fact that I was able to do that and to have that experience. And what I would do is just, my days were, waking up, Fajr, going and seeing the sunrise, having bhajiyas and literally bhajiyas and chapatis that we lived on, samosas, and then writing for most of the day, going out. They call it sunsets. It's like taking the dhow out for a sunset cruise, because the channel is absolutely beautiful. It's one of the most. I don't want to talk too much about it because I don't want people to flock there.
Okay, so let's just kind of steer it slightly in a different direction. That was when you sat down to write this book. Did you have those thoughts before you got to the island, or whilst you were there and you reconnected with yourself? You said, you realize you have the story in you, and now you're penning the book. What is it all about? Where did the ideas come from? And being a political journalist, how difficult is it, or was it for you, to take off your political hat or self, cast it aside or put it aside gently, and then go into this other world, into this perhaps almost
vulnerable,
but also kind of carefree in a sense, and just kind of try and be yourself and tell a story from your very true self?
Yeah, I think it took a bit of time to get to that point, because I had written it, I think it was November, and I remember getting onto that plane to Yemen and filing my last story on the Government of National Unity the day it was formed, after the elections, and just that was the day I kind of unplugged from the molecular of South African politics, which has been part of my life for such a big time, for such a long time. And I think it took months to get to that point where I could tell the story of thinking and iterating. And so I knew that I didn't know what the story would look like. I knew that there were vulnerabilities and emotions that I wanted to contend with in a way that I never allowed myself to contend with. Vulnerabilities around grief, vulnerabilities around love, vulnerabilities around identity and purpose. So it's definitely not my story. I wish I was a 27-year-old Nepo baby that lived off her mother. But I started having these thoughts. And so the story that kept coming back to me was not the story of the protagonist in the book, Farah. The story was that of her mother. And I became preoccupied with the thought of end of life when someone has had a full life, but unconventional life.
When you had those thoughts, was it also about your grief, the grief of having lost your dear mother and your dear father over the past while?
I think so, and I think I reckoned with that in the book with a character. I don't want to give away too much, but she loses her parent, and to house that emotion was a very cathartic journey for me. I think that I also had a moment of figuring out what comes next for me, and it was a unique experience in the sense that, you know, we tell stories of people who live full and big lives, but we don't often then have conversations of the fragility of end of life and what that looks like, right? And I had a parent who struggled or had a mental illness, and having been in that journey of having to parent a parent is a very, very difficult thing. And the thing about all of these vulnerabilities is that it's such unique, it's such shared experiences, but because we don't talk about it, we don't talk about the difficulty of existing with loss of parent. We don't talk about the difficulties of when Allah tests people that you love with their minds or with their bodies, you know, and it's such shared experiences. The grief of death is such shared experiences, yet we don't really talk about it.
Do we simplify it way too much by saying that it is and we know it is the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but is it us just simplifying it and perhaps an easy way to deal with our grief? Think about that and respond to me right after the ad break. Qaanitah Hunter, the journalist and a writer, author. She's authored 5 or 6 books, and she's, of course, in studio to talk to me, not on her political novels, but we are talking Why Am I Like This? So it is a book you need to go out and get it. And keep it for your holiday read. Stay with us. Welcome back, and I am with Qaanitah Hunter, the author, the journalist, and just an amazing young woman who's achieved so much in her life. But we look at people and we admire their achievements, and we kind of think that they've got this perfect life without realizing there's lots of stuff happening inside of them, behind the scenes. There's lots of stuff that they have to contend with. And it takes a huge and a big person to be able to get away, isolate themselves, start introspecting, and then making sense of where they're at in life, to make their peace, and then go on to write a book.
I think that grief is a messy process.
Yeah, I spoke about simplification, oversimplification
Yes.
of grief.
And it's very messy, and we live in a world where there must be this this sort of defined, you either don't have sabr and you are crying and grieving, or you know, have this unwavering belief that what is meant to be happens, and then you're there and you're strong. But it doesn't work like that. It's not an either-or situation. Essentially, it is, there's shades of gray and nuance that exist in grief that you can fully and deeply accept that what is meant to happen can happen. But it can be utterly and truly life-altering and shattering in so many ways. And that navigating that journey is not linear. For some people, it may look clean and polished. For some people, it may look hysterical. I always say that I wish I was one of those people that can grieve immediately when something bad happens and react immediately. I'm not one of those people. Okay, what does the situation call for? Do we need to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? I'm that logical take control person. And you have people who just succumb to the paralysis of grief and get out quicker on the other side. But the point is, for everyone, that process is very different. And what is a shared reality is that we all go through it.
Absolutely. No one's going to be immune from it. We all have to go at some point in our lives. Our time will be up. And in the process, we will be saying goodbye to lots of other people in our lives. Do you talk about it in the book? I know you don't want to give away too much, but I'm sure this is the kind of stuff you've unpacked. And who should be reading this book?
So the book was meant to be a light beach read.
That's what I thought when I read the title.
It was meant to be, it's a 27-year-old girl, Farah Nosipo Garda, on her, in an earnest way to a journey to herself. And her life sort of gets upended when she has to come from Cape Town to Joburg to look after her ailing mother, who eventually passes away. So that's a plot twist that I'm giving away, but again, it's.
But that's the synopsis of the book in the event, so that's fine.
but the journey through all of this to herself and beyond, I think is important, and it's funny, and there were themes that I was very intentional about. So the story, the characters took lives of their own, and I had a bit of fun of it. This auntie that I knew, I put her in this character, and weaving together characters. But there were themes, Auntie Judy, that was very important for me to touch on. I think the one thing that I was contending with quite a bit is this idea of loneliness, right? And it was something that I always didn't know how to grapple with, because I am a very social person. I have a big circle, but I always had this aching, aching, niggling pain of loneliness.
Emptiness, perhaps?
And it was something that I didn't know how to house. And housing it in this character was me kind of making sense of that. Similarly, the what you want out of your life, what you think is good for you versus what is actually good for you. Themes around community. We all link to loneliness. We sometimes don't understand how we are nurtured, how we are carried with the communities around us, and that how much having a village requires you to be the villager.
Absolutely.
That was something that I was very intentional about communicating about. That village looks different for different people. For me, I have 1 million siblings and lots of nephews and nieces and lots of friends and connections and journalists, and that's my village. For other people, that village is 1 or 2 people. For that people, it's complete strangers. But the idea that we exist as these in silos on this world, and this idea that your success is yours alone, is nonsense. And I think that we often think of community in times of distress, and we don't think of the construct of community on the uppance. And I think for me, when I think about my mother, I thought about my mother a lot, and none of what I wrote about is a reflection of her in any way, but her story and her character guided me in writing this book, where she was famously known as Appa Hunter from Reservoir Hills, right? Appa Hunter never left her house. She would make stacks and stacks of rotis and samosas, and that's what she was known to do. She made the best food. And if you, Auntie Julie, she knew you, and your sister-in-law's grandchild is getting married, she will need to bake and send something for that person.
And that, sadly, that kind of community mindedness seems to be dying out unless we're closely connected.
Yeah.
But otherwise, that is beginning to die out in our communities. Have you picked that up as well? And how do you think it's going to impact on Gen Z and future generations? But just kind of close your thought on who should be reading this book.
Yeah. So I think everyone should be reading this book. I think I wrote it for my sisters and my friends, right? But this book, I think, has appeal. Lots of people have read it and given me feedback to say they found themselves in some way in that story. I think it's funny, it's humorous, but it's also deep and heavy. So be prepared to go on a journey. I think it's an easy read. You can finish it in a day or two. But to go back to that question of, like, I wrote the story around a retirement village. Right, that's where her mother was, and the sense of community and the eccentric, different personalities that they encountered at this community, and that understanding that sometimes what's village for me is not village for you, and nurturing that is such an important thing. So I think about, you're talking about this sense of community in terms of Gen Z. What is the biggest epidemic in the world now? Loneliness. Why? Because consumerism forced us to a world where it's me and me and me and me. And so how then do we deal with things like depression, which the character deals with heavily, with anxiety? I speak about anxiety, panic attacks that she has.
So there's a lot of issues around, or rather you touch on mental health issues.
Yes. But in a normal, ordinary way.
That is a reality we're dealing with in this day and age.
Yeah.
Why do you think?
Because I think we regard it as these taboo big things that happen to a few people, when you and I know that it's such a common experience. And so by talking about it in a very ordinary way versus we are focusing on mental health is changes the dynamic to understand.
But there's still a lot of stigma around mental health issues, sadly.
Absolutely.
As aware as we are about it. And
as common as it is.
Absolutely. And as much as we talk about it and ventilate about it, it still is very, very stigmatized.
Absolutely. And that's why I think from the feedback that I got from people who've read it, I was quite, usually I am not one that fixates on feedback for books, because if you care about feedback, then you're going to have to care about the criticism and the positive. So I generally, am neutral to feedback. But it's easier when it's academic work, right? Because this is my brain. I compute and I put it on a piece of paper. You agree or you disagree. But when it's fiction, it's your heart, it's your soul, it's your vulnerabilities, it's your own experiences that shape you. It's your perspective of the world. It's crafted and weaved into these characters that become your children. And then you put this piece of work, kind of like a piece of art in the world, and people are contending with the kind of truest version of you, even though this is not your personal story. So I was very nervous about it. And from the feedback that I got, I think many people were like, oh my God, I went through the exact same thing. Or this was my own fears, and this was my own vulnerabilities. And again, it's simply because we don't talk about these things. We don't talk about we often get boxed in pathologies of, like, oh, this person doesn't know what they were doing with their lives, they're a lost soul. But actually, how many of us really know what path we should be on? For some of us, when you're 6 years old, I want to be a journalist, and at 17 you were in a newsroom, but that's not everybody's experience. Some people find themselves in their 20s, some people find what they need to do in their 30s. Some people's, I had a bit of fun, and maybe we can talk about it a little bit later, is with what healing looked like. And I drew on my own experience, because what I did was I'm a person that says, if something is wrong, do everything to fix it. So every psychologist, every psychiatrist, and even with my health, with weight loss. And so I took all of those experiences and I had fun with it in the book.
Wonderful. We've got about 12 minutes left to the final segment. So I do want to talk about your awards and where to from here for you, Qaanitah Hunter. I'm so privileged to have this amazing young lady in studio with me, and we're going to talk some more. Do hope you're enjoying the discussion. Stay with us. I'm quite sad that we just have a short time left with this amazing guest, and that, of course, is award-winning journalist Qaanitah Hunter. She's also an author. She's also a sought-after keynote speaker, and in 2023, she was selected as an Edward R. Murrow Journalism Leadership Fellow in the United States. Qaanitah, bringing all of that together, the books you've written, the articles you've written, your rise in the journalistic field, all of these awards, what stands out most for you? And at this tender age of your life, I mean, you still have a long, long stretch ahead of you. What are your aspirations? What are your dreams? So let's talk about what stands out for you in all of your achievements and where it's propelling you to next.
I think that for me, the opportunity to be of service is it. It's the driving force, and that opportunity, you know, when we started, you spoke about like, where do you get all the time? It really comes from a place that this is not about me in some ways, and that we have a responsibility to do what we can in the avenues and the opportunities that come our way. And so I think that has always been the guiding force for me. But the experiences that I've had in journalism comes from, I am the product of people who took a blind chance on me. Wow. You recall, I was 17 years old at Channel Islam, you know, begging Ponti and Azara to send me to a story. The same, you know, I worked for the Guptas. I worked, you know, when I went to the Sunday Times, or first I was at Mail and Guardian. So there's an earnestness to say, whatever. And Julie, let me say this to you. I come from a humble beginning in Reservoir Hills in Durban. Anything that's better than working at the Pick and Pay, it's the Checkers there, and which would have been an amazing opportunity as well. I'm not discounting it, but I'm saying, for me, I just kind of, anything's better than that. So I have not been married to like this big vision of like this pressure of I need to do this and this. I just had this enthusiasm that I would love to do all of these things, but if it didn't work out, alhamdulillah. And I think that was freeing for me as a child, because when I think about it now, I'm like, this young girl was wild and mad.
But this young, wild, mad girl has achieved so much in her life. We're living in the instant age. Young people, as soon as they've, you know, done with tertiary, they want instant gratification, they want instant fame, they want big money. That's what they chase after. We also see that they, you know, they refer to as the slashers because they move from job to job. Yeah. How do you view that? And I did early on ask you about the most momentous award or moment in your life. So if you can first respond to the young people in this day and age, given that we have a huge issue of unemployment in our country, and I think it's a global trend, so people are going to kind of, if they get the opportunity, migrate and kind of move towards meaningful work, meaningful lives.
So I think it's easier for us as Muslims because we have a purpose, we know where we're going, right? So the journey is mapped in the broader sense. So the idea now then comes to is that what is my role and what am I seeking to do in my own personal life? And I think that's what I say to I work with lots of young people at the Debrief Network, and I say to them, right, when you build a house, you just don't take a brick and you slap it down and you put some cement and you hope that a mansion is built. You do it, you plan, you seek help, you seek advice, and you build it brick by brick. So it's never, the house is not built overnight. And so I think by having that deep realization, because in this phase of my life, which is somewhat a building phase again, right? As I come back to journalism, and we can talk about that journey. I always say that I feel like I'm a City of Joburg, city power official that's like just connecting wires and don't know what's working. But your responsibility is the trying. Your responsibility is doing better and showing up more than you did yesterday. And I think that's what guides me. And I try to say this to my young team and some of the young people that I interact with, to say, I didn't know how I was going to end up on the front page of the Sunday Times, but I knew that that's where I would like to be. I thought it will take me from at the time I was 18 or 19 years old. I thought if I get one opportunity by the time I'm 60, great. And so you then channel your energy in a constructive way, because remember, energy is a finite thing. What you water grows. And so if you put energy in things that are not constructive, then essentially that's what's going to grow. So it's not that deep and existential, more than it says, today, what am I choosing to put my energy in, and am I okay with what that reaps? And that for me is a easy calculation that young people can say, okay, that makes sense. Then, you know, if you want to do X, there's a price to it. Everything has a price, and so it doesn't become so existential when you think about your future or the goals that you have. So coming back to a moment in life which was like, okay, this is a big moment. I think that I never allow myself those opportunities, because there's always like a, you know, that thing of like, okay, we did it, okay, great, close it up, do the next thing, close it up, do the next thing. And I remember earlier this year, I was hosting a show for the Yaqeen Institute, and they had shut down the S04. And we were the only people in the S04 in Turkey. And I thought, what a life. That was a moment, you know, I've interviewed heads of state and whatever, but that moment was like, wow. And I at that point I wanted to call Mrs. Hunter.
Okay, now let me come in here. Which is the most memorable interview you've ever done?
The most memorable interview I have ever done was the mother of the Marikana victims, one of the mothers of the Marikana victims.
Okay.
That sits with me. That sits with me every day. Other cool interviews, I guess, have been. I've interviewed a few heads of state that were quite nice. I think I like the underdog. I think the underdog interviews are the ones that are the most exciting for me.
You also made reference to being in service. You and I had an off-camera discussion around service, but as you speak, I realize that service is a big thing for all of us. What's your concept of service, and how do you believe that service should actually make an impact, a meaningful impact in people's lives?
And Julie, I look at it like this, right? We don't have control over what we are blessed with, barakah-wise or rizq-wise, right? So I may have time, you may have money, another person may have a very specific skill. But whatever you've been blessed with, it's obligated on you to use that in service of humanity and in service of others. If mine, I mean, I have the easiest of it all. I type on a computer, you know. But for other people, that service is cleaning a masjid. For another person, it is feeding orphans. And so whatever it is, remember, there's a dua that always sits with me, because when I was in the depths of it, and you know, when you were questioning like, what's the point of all of this, and you realize, Allahumma la isha illa ishul akhirah. Oh Allah, there's no life except the life of the hereafter. So it takes away that instantaneous like what now moment, because you know what's gonna come. And so your job is just to do everything you can in what's given to you. And the worst thing that you can do is look over your shoulder to see what another person is doing. When you are in service, the outcome, people like you, people hate you.
But being in service is also very self-satisfying.
No, it's selfish. It's a selfish endeavor, because it makes you feel like a hero.
Nothing wrong with that, is there? Absolutely. And I mean, if we keep questioning those type of narratives, then we're not going to get anything done.
Absolutely.
You are here talking about your books, and you have promised a future interview, which I can't wait to have with you, inshallah. But let's talk about, you know, how do you separate, your fiction writing to your hardcore political journalism? How do you kind of separate yourself from the two?
I have to always, when I'm writing fiction, I take myself out of my current experience, like lived experience. I have to go to a completely different environment. And again, it took months of shutting down mentally for this, and out of that deep political space, because it's a very noisy space. I write a column every week. I write articles. I write features. I write scripts. I edit, copy. So it's very noisy in my head. So I have to quieten that down. And that's why I say writing a book is such a labor of love. It is. Every time I write a book, I say I'll never write a book again. And then I forget the pain, much like having children.
Absolutely. We've come almost to the end of the show. I'm really sad that the time has flown by so quickly. Your parting comments to people watching us this morning about politics, or rather about young people who are wanting to go into the space of journalism and the future of journalism and broadsheets, very quickly.
I think that, firstly, I'm superbly grateful for this opportunity. Actually, I was, 10 years old when I would listen to you on the radio on a Sunday morning. Grew up listening to you.
Wow,
so when I think of a Sunday morning and Cook Sisters, I think of your voice.
Wow.
That's a formative part that you've had in our lives growing up.
Alhamdulillah.
But also you playing such an important role in understanding what was possible, because hearing you on the radio made me realize like it was possible for me to be on the radio, and that's not lost on me in terms of what taking up space means for other people and younger people looking at you. And so the representation thing is, I mean, no one wakes up and says, I'm sure you don't wake up and say, I want to be a role model to Qaanitah today, but you are, and so it's about having making the most of the opportunities that come your way. But more importantly, I think that it's such an amazing thing to be a South African. Think about it. Where else in the world you have a woman in hijab, she writes politics, she gets a bit burnt out, she says, right, I'm going to write. Like, that is what I love about this country, and what I love about the community that endures us. We were talking about this publisher. It was unthinkable that they would publish a Muslim girl fiction brown story in a mainstream publication, in mainstream bookstores, just maybe 5 or 10 years ago.
Many congratulations on all your achievements. We've got to wrap up, but I look forward to our next interview. The amazing Qaanitah Hunter, award-winning author and journalist, award-winning journalist and author, and I can't wait to have her back. Thank you for watching. Till the next time, as always, Khuda Hafiz.